Hello, this is Charlie. Welcome to Kratom Sobriety, episode 61. Today, Jacob has an interview with Jasmine. She's a 30-something person that got hooked on those kava kratom tonics when she had a couple of years of sobriety off booze. And it's a very prevalent story we're hearing more and more with that product in particular. Then Decima has an announcement, exciting. We have now kratom meetings online, these support groups, 7 days a week. And she's going to tell you about this new meeting on Friday nights. And then at the end, she has resource of the week about laughter. So hold on and listen through the whole episode to catch that. Before we get to the interview, Jasmine inspired me to do like this checklist. You're addicted to kratom if you meet 7 or 10 of these criterion. And this is particularly true if you're extract user or kratom-kava tonic user. I think this list is really particularly for you. If you're the type who has an kratom addiction, it's a powder use or a capsule use, and you order online and you are able to keep a supply in the house, this checklist won't apply to you. First, there's progression. So you start with 1 serving, and it might be a couple times a week, but just over time that ramps up, and the number can get pretty astronomical for some people. Number 2, you start to plan to quit sometime in the future. Like when you get through a certain project at work or some other milestone in your life, you got to get through this period of time, but I'll quit later. 3, you're doing some kind of masking or hiding or lying about your kratom use to the people around you. Number 4, you start neglecting important things in your life. You cut corners. Maybe you don't take your dog on a walk as much as you used to, or you skip a workout that you used to do that was really important to you. And just using the kratom numbs you to the fact that you don't care about that anymore. Number 5, you can't keep kratom in the house or you'll consume too much of it. So you start buying kratom at the most enough for that day. And eventually that evolves to going to the store multiple times. Number 6, you start promising to yourself that you'll quit tomorrow. You swear it off, just get through today. Tomorrow will be a new day, and you do that every day. 7, you keep taking kratom even though it's making you sick. The side effects are really starting to pile up. You're throwing up. It's making you nauseous. Number 8, you start rotating your stores because you're embarrassed of how much you're buying. So you have the whole city mapped out and what gas stations, what vape shops you can buy your product at. Number 9, you start having money issues. And being an extract user or being a tonic drinker, those products add up. And we're talking thousands of dollars eventually. And number 10, you get to the spot where you're stuck. And this is where a lot of people end up. You can't quit because the withdrawals are too much, or you are able to get through the withdrawals 3 days to a week, but you're a chronic relapser. After that, people start to seek more help. And there's all sorts of ways that you can try to, you can go to rehab, you can go to meetings, you can go an Airbnb detox, you can use medicated assisted treatment. Eventually, most extract users or tonic drinkers will get to this point where they're stuck. And it's like a trap. You either just taking the product because you don't want to go through the withdrawals, or you are able to get through the withdrawals, but you just chronically relapse. Jasmine was able to quit her first try. And I think it's an inspiring story, and I think it'll be good to hear her interview. But before we do that, Decima has an announcement for you.
Hey, my friends, Decima here with a very exciting announcement. I have so been looking forward to sharing this hot off the press news with you all. So, drum roll, please. You asked for it. You even begged for it at times, and we listened. And in fact, by the time you hear this, it will have already happened. So please run on over and check out the kratommeetings.com right meow, where you will find that as of this past Friday, May 17th, we have added a Friday night meeting to our weekly schedule, and the crowd goes wild. Yes, we could not be happier, you guys, to finally say that we now have a kratom specific recovery meeting available every single day or night of the week. Now, This Friday night meeting is going to be a little different than the rest. I'm so excited about it. We want to bring you something unique that hasn't been done before as a way of socializing and unwinding together after a long, busy week. Think like open mic night or amateur hour, gathering of creativity if you must. For our very first meeting, everybody brought their baby photos and treasured items from their childhood. We got to meet and love our own and each other's inner child. It was wild. How freaking cool is that? Friday night meetings will be a bit more casual than the rest of the week's meetings and a way for us to share our creativity and talents with one another. There are so many amazing and talented creators and artists in this recovery community, and we just thought this would be a great way to highlight each other. For example, I plan to read tarot cards for anyone who would like to be read at a near future Friday night meeting. I hope to see those of you that are into that kind of thing there. Now, some people are planning to bring their guitars, their artwork, and even their voices to sing. I cannot wait to see what you guys bring to the table. Now, there are probably going to be times when some will still need that space to share, and that's okay too. We will continue to hold that space as needed. We are there for support first and foremost, so that will remain top priority. I'm also beside myself to announce that the call to action for service within the community has been answered, and you guys are going to start seeing a lot of cool, new, and not so new volunteer faces hosting and facilitating these meetings and events. Oh my God, I am so excited. I'd like to take this opportunity personally to publicly acknowledge and thank every single one of you. There's too many for me to really list one by one, but you guys know who you are. It is because of volunteers like you that we are even able to bring these sort of gatherings and events to the community so that we can form those genuine connections in those squares that are helping us save each other's lives. Yes, we are saving each other's lives. So, with that, I'm going to leave you guys with a little bit of a teaser. So stay tuned because behind the scenes, we may or may not be brewing up a couple other things, possibly a daytime meeting to add to the calendar. So stay tuned. We look forward to bringing you guys all the meetings and events. So, as usual, if you are interested in volunteering time to host, co host, or help out in any other way, please reach out to me, Charlie, or Jake.
Hello, Kratom Quitters. Welcome to Kratom Sobriety. This is Jacob. Our guest is Jasmine. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you for asking.
Good.
Spring is starting to come and it's getting a little warmer, so that's been nice and all that fun stuff. Cool. So, how would you want to introduce yourself?
So, my name is Jasmine. I'm 28 years old, about to be 29. I live in Austin, Texas. I work in marketing. I'm actually getting married next weekend, so a lot of big
Congrats.
stuff happening. Thank you. I'm in the course of getting married and starting a new job within the next couple of weeks. So, a lot of really exciting things, but I love living in Austin, Texas, and plan to stay here for the next couple of years, and it's been good.
Nice. I've never actually been there. I've only been to, I think, San Antonio when I was a kid. I should get to Austin at some point.
It's a lot of fun.
I talked to a couple of people that are in that area. It seems like a good area, and I worked for a couple companies that have offices there, but I never made it myself. What do you like to do for fun when you're not working?
So I have my own podcast called Clean Sips. It's about just sobriety and living a sober lifestyle, how to have fun sober, build community sober. I have a dog. She's almost a year old, so I love to just go on walks with her, spend a lot of time outside, like being on the water, paddleboarding, things like that, just like hanging out with friends. I'm pretty chill. So just love just relaxing, reading, things like that. So
Nice. Those are all good, healthy hobbies. Let's get into some of the less fun stuff. When did you first encounter kratom, and when did you first try it?
So I first heard about kratom from, I think this was probably 3 years ago, from just an old friend of mine, and this was when it was newer, and they compared it to matcha, like on the same level as matcha, which, knowing now, it's very different than matcha. Just
So,
like this new plant that boosts your mood. I didn't really know much about it. Didn't hear much about it after that, but I first heard about the popular kava kratom drinks on, like, a lot of people that I hear on this podcast and just in general on a podcast that I was a really big fan of, that promoted a lot of like wellness products and promoted it as this alcohol-free alternative. And to give some context too, I've been sober from alcohol for almost 2 years. So when I got sober from alcohol, I was so excited about this. Like, I loved mocktails, alcohol alternatives, things like that. And so I first went to a CBD store and got one of the shots, and was warned that it tasted horrible, would not be very easy to take at first. And I tried about half of it and hated it the first time. It made me feel awful. I felt dizzy and nauseous, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. But I tried the second half and still felt the same, probably like a day later. And then I didn't try it again for months, but something in me was like, maybe I'll give it one more shot. I hear so many good things about this, and people love it and the things they say about it. So I tried it again, and unfortunately really enjoyed it the second time that I had, and it all just started from there.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that same thing at the same kind of usage story. And congrats on 2 years sober from alcohol. That's great. Do you have any
Thank
other
you.
sort of history? You're welcome. Any sort of other history of substance abuse or anything like that? Or was alcohol your kind of first foray into it?
So I wasn't drinking alcohol every single day, but I had a huge binge drinking problem from the time I was 18. So for the past 10 years, had a really bad binge drinking problem. I would go out and just lose track of the drinks that I would have, and just that was the main thing that I did for fun. And when I gave up alcohol, it was such a big deal because it had been such a big part of my life for a long time. And I thought I was free of the grip of any sort of substance. I also smoked marijuana daily for a period of time too, probably for a couple of years. So
Okay.
I think I've always struggled with substance abuse.
Okay, that's helpful context. Just good to understand your overall general relationship with substances and substance abuse. I think there's, unfortunately, so many people get trapped in the kratom pickle. They hear about it just like you did, and then pretty soon they're addicted and hooked up. So how did your usage progress? Tell me a little bit about that.
It was definitely a snowball effect. It started off really slow. I would say I would take, probably for the first couple of months that I was taking the kava kratom shots, it was maybe 2 on a weekend, once a week, maybe even shorter spans than that. And then almost a year ago, or a little bit over a year ago, I started a job that just was not a good fit for me. It was just a really toxic work environment, and I struggled a lot in that job. And I it was all right for the first couple of months, but then my kratom usage became more and more when that job started getting really toxic and stressful. And that was probably, I would say, October of 2023 is when my last job that I'm not at anymore, got really bad. And I started taking these shots daily. And it got to a point where I would wake up and need to take them. I was taking maybe 2 a day when I was working, and then some on the weekends also. And then it progressively got worse to 3 a day, 4 a day, 5 a day. And I got up to 8 or 9 a day towards the very end.
I also went through, it was interesting. When I first started, I thought it was helping me with productivity. I actually had one of the best years of feedback, got promoted at work. And then similarly, it went from being helpful and getting me through stressful situations to making me stressed. So it's funny how that works, but I guess
Yes.
that's addiction in a nutshell, right?
had never been addicted to something like that. I had never depended on something like that ever in my life before. Then I think for a long time I was in denial about it because I would compare it to like coffee, and I would like not drink coffee and just take the kratom shot instead. And I felt like I was really productive at work, but like you said, I was really productive until I wasn't. And I, towards the end of this job that I left back at the beginning of March, I could tell I was probably about to get fired because I was doing my job less and I was such a zombie and just so obsessed and dependent on kratom.
Oof, that all resonates with me. When I lived in the Boston area, I used to I would have a morning meeting and then I'd have a break, and it would be just enough time to ride my bike to the nearest smoke shop and then come back. And the amount of time I told myself I wasn't going to do that and did it was just relatively amazing. So, so you said you've been sober from alcohol for 2 years. How long did it take for you to go from this was using it sporadically to using a shot or two a day to using like however many you got up to at the end?
So my timelines are blurry, so I might be a little off here, but I think it was probably about a year of just like sporadically using it. And so I got sober from alcohol in June of 2022. And
Okay.
then probably about a year of sporadically using it, and then would start using it more and more after the year mark of being sober from alcohol. It just progressively got worse it was like my job triggered it so much. And then I would also use it on the weekends too, and like going out with friends and things like that, and not using alcohol. And the crazy thing is I very much considered myself still sober because I was like, this is an alcohol alternative. I'm still sober technically. Like I even was doing my sober podcast while on kratom, and I didn't even consider it a problem. And I am very open and honest about that because I think like sobriety is not linear, and we can struggle with one thing and then stop it and then struggle with something completely different that we never even saw coming.
Totally. I was maybe 2.5 years sober from alcohol when I went on another person's podcast as a guest and was like, oh, totally sober, which I was.
Yep.
I thought I was at the time, like same. I didn't recognize it as an issue because I believed the same thing, that it was like a harmless supplement and that the withdrawals were like coffee and all that other stuff that turns out to be not so true. So what ultimately led you to say, uh-oh, I think I have a problem here, and how did that all transpire?
So they sell them out. Since I live in Texas, it's legal here, and they sell them at pretty much every gas station, like every 7-Eleven. They're just all around where I live, my apartment, everything. And I would hop around from gas station to gas station throughout the day because I was so embarrassed to buy more than two at a gas station. And that is addiction. Like that is like any type of being secretive or having to hide something from anybody. That's when I realized I started to have a problem. And I would say in January of 2023 and February of this year was when it was really bad. That was where it was like 6 to 8 a day, almost every single day. Definitely I was taking them every day, but it got to that was like the high point. And it was actually which is crazy. It was the weekend I got engaged, which was March 15th. I had, I think, probably 6 that day, and I was still fine. Like the engagement was beautiful, it was great and everything. And my mom surprised me, and she came in town for the engagement, and she was there, which was wonderful. And I think part of me, or I know part of me at the time, was like, oh, and she stayed with me while she was here, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to like buy the kava kratom drink like I usually do because like she's staying with me. And like it was so secretive, and I would take the shots like in the car before I would go out, and I hid it from everyone. Like my fiance, like he didn't know anything about it. He thought that he just saw them sometimes as like little energy shots like in my refrigerator, didn't really ask a lot of questions. And I didn't really talk about them. And I think when you're trying to keep something undercover like that, like it definitely is a problem. But anyway, back to the weekend I got engaged on March 15th, like my mom came into town, and I remember the Sunday of the engagement, this is 2 days later, I woke up and I was like, I'm not going to take any kratom-kava shots today. And I was like, I'm going to be fine. Like we were getting ready to go to church, and I got up and I immediately was just like super, super dizzy, couldn't even stand up because like it had gotten so bad to where I needed one as soon as I woke up to be able to function. And I I wasn't even in denial. Like I knew what the problem was, but I didn't want to tell anyone. I just wanted to overcome it by myself. No one knew. It was such a deep secret. And I told my mom, I was like, I think I need to go to the hospital. And she took me to the hospital. Part of me was hoping that they would test me and find kratom in my system so I could just come out and tell
Yeah.
her about it. And I still just kept my mouth shut that day. Went and got some fluids, felt a little bit better, but still was not great at all. The withdrawals, like I do not wish those on my worst enemy. They were truly horrible, like the physical and mental withdrawals. But that day, I went to sleep that night. My mom, my fiance, my best friend, like they were all so worried about me. They thought I was just like sick with some undiagnosed illness because for months I had just been telling people like, oh, I'm just really tired, like work is really hard, like I had just become a shell of myself, and that was my excuse. And it all just came to a head this weekend. And I the next day, it was a Monday, this is my, or I guess that Sunday is my kratom sobriety date, but that Monday I remember waking up and my mom was in my living room just crying because she didn't know what was wrong with me, because I was detoxing so badly. I was just had I don't know, I felt so fatigued, like mentally just really depressed. Just my skin was so dry. When I would remove clothes, like flakes would just fly off my skin. And I knew what the cause was. And I was like, I still felt so much shame around it that I didn't want to talk about it. And I remember that Monday I went to the bathroom and my mom was in my living room and she was just like doing some things for me. She literally had to wait on me hand and foot because the withdrawals were so bad. And I'm a Christian, and I believe that God put certain things on our hearts to take action and tell people. And I like went to the bathroom and I just felt what I know is the Holy Spirit tell me, like, you need to open up about this now and you need to tell someone, because you're gonna die if you stay in this just like endless cycle of usage. And I came out from the bathroom and I just told my mom, I broke down and just told her everything. I was like, this is these shots that I take sometimes. She's seen me take them. She's taken like half of one before. She didn't love it, but she was like, I get why you like them. She didn't know what the extent of the problem was for me, but she was receptive and so sweet. And she told me, she's like, thank you for telling me, because I thought something else was so wrong with you. Yeah. And we know that this is the problem. And it was just, I don't know, it was so nice. And then I called my fiance right after that and told him everything too. And he was just as receptive and kind about it. And after that, and also too, I will say that I put myself in a lot of debt over these. Like they're $8, $8 to $10 per shot here in Austin. And I'm talking like thousands and thousands of dollars in debt because of these. And I felt so embarrassed. I had taken out like some loans because I had just drained my savings. Like it was such a problem. And I was in this deep hole where I felt like there was no way out. So I had to keep it hidden because I was so ashamed of everything. And once I told someone, which is the biggest piece of advice that I can give, is to tell someone. That was when I was finally able to just quit cold turkey.
Wow. First thing I want to say is I'm sorry I had to go through that, because I've been there myself and I know it's a very painful experience. Not only just the pain of the withdrawals, but the pain of the shame and the guilt and the damage and all of that. It's a lot to cope with. So the secretiveness, that's, like you said, that's hallmark of addiction. There's something really about kratom in particular that seems to make it even more sneaky. I think because it's for a lot of people, they're coming from something else. Like it wasn't their first addiction. So they don't want to open up that can of worms again and go tell family and friends that, like, I'm back in it. And oh, by the way, it's a substance that you probably never heard of, or think it's like a lesser substance. The financial pain, I was an extract user too. So they definitely add up. And I went through quite a bit of money that I'm still mad about, because I could probably buy a car with the amount of money I spent on it. But for anybody that's listening to this, maybe you don't think kratom is a problem and somehow you heard about this and you're checking out this episode, I just want to ask you, does what Jasmine just described sound like anything other than addiction to any other drug? Like, how is that different than anything else? Because I don't see how it is. So anybody that's still out there saying that kratom can't be addictive, I think needs to really examine what they're saying, because it definitely can.
I think it's more addictive than other things personally for me. I think everyone's different, but like I said, alcohol and weed never had a hold on me like kratom did. Like, it's truly crazy.
Same. I think alcohol did, but opiates, weed, coke, I've done them all. Getting addicted to them all, and kratom was if it's not as bad as alcohol was for me personally, it's a very close second, but definitely beat out opiates in my opinion. All right, so you have your engagement party, you go to the hospital, you come clean. How did the first couple of days go? How did you get through the withdrawals? Did you take any supplements? Did you get any treatment?
So I cold turkeyed it completely, didn't go to treatment, didn't take any drugs or anything to help me. I thought I was going to have to. I told my mom, I was like, I don't know if I need to go to like rehab or not because I've never been addicted, like physically dependent on something like this before. And at that point, I'd already been detoxing for 2 days. And it did, for me, it was like the first full day was pretty awful. The second day was still pretty awful, but a little bit better towards the end of the day. I'll say by the third day, I could start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The mental withdrawals the first couple of days were really bad. And that may sound scary to some people who are looking to quit, but I promise you, it's better to go through the couple days of like depression and mental withdrawals than to spend years addicted to this substance that had such a major hold on me. And like I said, I really believe in just prayer and submitting things like this to God. And I just spent a lot of time in prayer and just like a lot of time outside. And I would force myself to get up and go walk my dog. And I really believe that God is the main reason that I was able to get through this. And I know everybody's sobriety story is very different, but for me, that's what worked. And I feel like just talking to people too helped a lot, and talking about when I was craving them. I told my mom when I first told her about everything that I was like, I'm really scared I'm going to go buy another one, but I need someone to hold me accountable. And she has been great holding me accountable ever since. But I remember just getting some blood work done too. And luckily I had no like damage from them, but it could have very well have caused a lot of physical damage. I feel like I was right on the edge of causing physical damage there because they were making me sick too. So I was throwing up also when I was taking them, very nauseous. And I would force myself to eat because I had absolutely no appetite those first couple of days. And I was like, I have to eat. I have to get through this. It's only going to be a couple of days. If you will be so much happier when you push through this. And once I got through it, I would say after the first week, I started to feel more like myself again. And ever since then, I feel like it's just like I experienced like what they call the pink cloud when I stopped drinking alcohol. And it's just like this, you're high off of life and you just see so clearly in what you were missing when you were under the grip of this substance. And I've started to experience the pink cloud again, which has been really nice because I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot how good sobriety feels. Like it feels so amazing. And it makes me sad to think that I feel like I allowed myself to get into this cycle, but at the same time, like these kava kratom shots, it's a very controversial kind of marketing strategy that I know the owner is like a recovering alcoholic and it's marketed towards sober people, which is wild to me. But I think I'd listened to an episode of this podcast with a woman who had a very similar story to me. She talked about if you got trafficked and then pumped with heroin, and because you're not really choosing to get
she had no idea what these were, and it's a whole hell of a thing.
I remember listening to her episode and I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I got hooked on this podcast. Cause I was like, there are no other, I'm like, I know somebody has to be like talking about this. This is such a big thing, especially with the Reddit group and everything. Also, when I heard her story, I was like, oh my gosh, we have such a similar story. This is crazy.
It is crazy how the stories are, I guess they're so similar with all of addiction, but like with kratom in particular and with the different brands and like how insidious it is. So you hit the pink cloud. How long have you been clean now totally from kratom?
So it will be exactly 2 months in 4 days. I don't know how many days that is exactly. I'm not great at math, but it's almost 2 full months, which is
that's amazing.
I think like 50 something days, which is crazy because I truly thought I would never be clean of these. Like when it was really bad towards the end, I was like, this is just my life now because I don't see a world without these shots. And for anyone who's listening and feels that way, please know there is a world without them and it's so much better. And when you get to the other side. Like, it is 1000% worth it. And I will say too, I've also gone to meetings every week since I stopped. I'd never gone to AA before this. I'd never felt the need to go to any sort of meeting, but I've gone to Cocaine Anonymous, which is for here, it's for like all mind altering substances. But I still haven't found an in-person group for kratom specifically, which I feel like would be really great to have.
I don't know of any in-person groups yet. There's a ton of online meetings now, but it would be cool to have that. I too, I keep saying I'm going to go to the kratom meetings, but I never do. But I go to an in-person smart recovery meeting because I find that to be, just for me, I get distracted with online meetings and end up missing part
Same.
of it, and it's not the best for my recovery. But okay, so that's what it seems like you may have learned between this and your alcohol addiction, the need for maybe a bit more recovery work to sustain your sobriety. Is that kind of your plan moving forward?
Definitely. And I just want to use too every platform I have to be able to talk about this and bring awareness to this too, because I think there's such a stigma. Also, like you said, I feel like it's such a niche addiction that, especially with the kava kratom shots, not a lot of people even know what they are. Like, I haven't even told many people, I haven't even talked about the addiction publicly really until now. But I feel like it's so important to bring awareness to, especially a lot of my friends are sober, also don't drink, and I wouldn't want them to fall into the same addiction that I was in. But definitely just going to meetings, remaining accountable, just I think like telling people close to me when I do crave them, because I do still crave them, but I will not ever go buy one ever again because I just know the damage it caused to my life.
I feel the same way. There's this group, or there's this very loud, I don't think they're a large group, but they're a very loud, vocal group of, I would say, advocates for kratom, that it doesn't matter what your experience is. The minute you go out and publicly say something against the plant, they always try to pull information out of you. And I don't believe it's from a place of trying to understand or sympathize with you. It's of, I want to get something that I can use to turn it around and say it wasn't the kratom's fault, or it wasn't the product you were using's fault. It's your fault because you're a defective human being. And we'll take personal accountability. And yes, okay, that's addiction 101. You have to take personal accountability. There's nothing this because you've been through booze addiction like I have. They're not going to start. It's not like, okay, Jeremy got sober, Jasmine got sober, turn off the liquor store, shut the breweries down. No, that's not going to happen. But at the same time, it's like Budweiser isn't out there saying, hey, our beer is non-addictive and you can drink and you're going to be fine and there's no health consequences. Whereas the kratom industry is out there like saying this is the best product there is and it has no flaws and all that stuff that we know is nonsense. So it's a really weird dichotomy.
And I also too used to get really defensive about kratom because I knew that, like, I was like, you have to ask, like, why are you getting so defensive about it? I feel like deep down, the whole time I knew it was dangerous, but I was just in denial about it. And like you said, it's with like alcohol and different things like that. Like, they're not gonna take them off the shelves completely. But I think it's just with kratom and with these kratom kava shots specifically, they're so dangerous because you're not, like, for me at least, you couldn't even notice I had taken them. Like, I wasn't drunk,
same.
I wasn't high. I could take them literally any time of the day and it was acceptable. With alcohol, was not that way with me. I would at least wait until the evening or the weekend. So it's very different in my opinion.
Saying the active ingredient in kratom is metrogenine, which is a partial opiate agonist. The only partial opiate agonist that I'm familiar with is buprenorphine, which is in Suboxone, and it's my understanding that is a heavily controlled substance. So to say kratom is harmless and it doesn't require any regulation. I'm not for banning anything because I just don't think that type of thing works, but to say there can be no regulation and kratom as a food, to me, is just silly because everything else is regulated on some level. There should at least be some sort of warning or something to let people know what could happen. Not saying it's going to happen to everybody. I'm sure there are people that can use kratom in moderation. I know I can't, but I'm sure someone can, and if that's what they want to do, great. But I think they should go into that knowing what could happen, like you do with any other drug, versus being told that it's harmless and safe and all that stuff when it isn't.
Exactly. And I know that when I first tried it, you didn't even have to be 21 to buy it. They sold it at like Sun Life Organics, like very just like juice bowl places, things like that. It was very plant-based wellness tonic type of thing. And I'm like, how in the world was that sold so casually? But now it's luckily you have to be 21 to buy it, but it's still an issue. So.
I don't know what the requirement is in Maine now where I live. It's probably, who knows what it is. It might be 18 for all I know. I haven't seen it in gas stations yet. I'm sure it's on its way, but who knows? I haven't been looking either, so who knows? It sounds like you've been no relapses. You were able to get through the withdrawals and get back into recovery. What are you, other than the meetings, you mentioned you have a podcast. Is there anything else that you're doing to stay sober and to stay off kratom and other drugs?
I'd mentioned the podcast. I definitely want to we have a small following right now, but I really want to be open and very public about like my experience with kratom, and just honest too that while having the podcast, it was actively in my life and I was taking it and I didn't even know that it was an issue. But continuing with the podcast, and like I'd said, my faith is very important to me, and that's something that it got me sober from alcohol, and it's going to keep me sober from kratom. And I think just continuing to really dive deep into my faith and making sure that spiritually I'm just continuously in a good place is going to keep me really strong and sober, and just staying in a good routine too. Because I think one of the hardest parts about quitting was how much of a routine like my kratom usage was. Like it was just like clockwork. Wake up, go grab one, have one after breakfast, after lunch, before dinner, after dinner. And I think just finding things to replace that routine of addiction, just like I said, going for walks, calling a friend, reading, just it's amazing how much time you have all of a sudden when, but for me, when kratom was gone from my life, I was like, wow, I became so productive, which is so ironic because I thought kratom was making me so productive. But when I got sober, my fiance was like, who is this person? You're running like 1,000,000 miles a minute. Cause I was catching up on all the things that I let slip because of my addiction. Cause there was a lot to catch up on. Like I said, like the getting out of the debt and just little basic life things that I had, even just taking my dog for walks. I had like really neglected her a lot because of my addiction. And I don't know, life is so much more fulfilling now. And I think that is just going to continue to help me stay sober.
I think it will too. I noticed a lot of the same things, like when even, when I would say I was more functional and there wasn't really much of a, like, I don't know, sedating high or anything with kratom, but there were still TV shows that I watched that I had to rewatch because I didn't remember everything. And the routine, I definitely was able to get a lot of time back, because when you're taking multiple and you're an extract user, you got to go to the store multiple times a day unless you decide to buy enough. And it's never enough, because when you plan to buy a bunch, you just end up taking more.
They all go so quickly. I would only buy 2 at a time because of that.
Same. The most I would ever buy was like enough to get through a day. I do remember I went on a trip at one point in the middle of it to go to see some friends in New York City, and I remember buying like hundreds of dollars worth of kratom extract to just get through, and it didn't even last me the whole trip, which is just crazy.
Going on like trips or vacation where it's not sold too, that's a whole other thing. Like I'm from Alabama and I went home for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And it's illegal there. And I didn't have a lot like issues withdrawing or anything, but I just remember being like, what am I going to do when I run out? Because I had brought them with me, and I never want to go through that again. I just want to go and enjoy being with family and a vacation. And I don't know, it's just the mental battle. And I would look so forward to taking them when I got back. And it was just, I don't know, it really just, I realized how much real estate they just had in my mind. And it's good to have that free again.
One of my many quits and relapse cycles, I went on an international trip, and where I went, if kratom wasn't legal the first couple of days, I thought I had enough time, and the withdrawals weren't going to be that bad because I had relapsed, and it was only a couple weeks that I used, but man, they were not good. So it was like the first 4 days were a nightmare. Then I finally felt better and was finally like having a good time. And then I got home and I was like, oh, I'll be good now. No, literally the next day, the first thing I did was relapse on kratom. So fun stuff. So what would be your kind of top tip to someone that is getting ready to quit kratom?
Make sure that someone in your life close to you knows that you're planning on quitting and that you have a problem with it. That is like the thing that got me clean, is just opening up, because it was such a deep, dark secret, and the freedom in that is just, it's incredible. And I wish I would have known that sooner, to open up to someone about it, and someone that really like cares about you and your sobriety and is going to hold you accountable long term, and that really supports that, because that in person or like support group or going to meetings and just having someone in your life that knows that you have a problem is so important.
That would be my top tip. There, out of every interview I've done, maybe that's not been the top tip someone's gave, but it's come up and everybody's said the same thing, that the minute you tell someone, there's no going back. Like, you can't go and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this stuff and trying to quit. I'm doing everything I can, and then tomorrow be like, oh, I decided it's fine. I'm just gonna go spend another $100 on kratom, because they're gonna be like, you just told me yesterday that was a problem. Like, what changed? And you're like, oh, nothing. I just determined it wasn't a problem anymore. Like, the delusional thinking will be rather apparent rather quickly. So there's no going back once you do that. And it can be very scary too, because for a lot of people, it's like you said, it's this big dark secret addiction, and there's a lot of shame there. But once you swallow your pride, get past the shame and the guilt, you will feel a lot better. And having someone that cares about you, that can hold you accountable, is super helpful.
100%. And it's like, addiction is not something to be ashamed of by any means. Like, so many people struggle with it. And I like to believe that everything happens for a reason. And I feel like I was meant to go through this to really have a bigger heart for addiction, because I had never struggled with addiction on this level. And if you're struggling with it, it's going to hurt worse to keep it in long term. And it's just so important to know that you shouldn't be ashamed of it, and that more people can relate to you than you probably think.
It's good to hear you say that. It took me a lot longer than 29 years to figure that out myself. So the younger that you can figure that out, I think the better, because as you can see, addiction whack-a-mole is how I heard it described one time, like the game whack-a-mole, where it's like, if you aren't vigilant, maybe you quit, booze, like Jasmine did, and then you get on kratom, and then you quit that, and then you just are like, okay, I'm fixed now, and you stop doing all the things, and then something else could pop up, and if you're not ready, it could also take over your life.
100%. I was so ashamed too, because I feel like I talk about sobriety so much, like on my like social media platforms, and like my friends even look to me as like the sober like person in their life who like did not do any substance. And like, I feel like a lot of people look up to me in a way, and I had so much shame. I was like, I definitely can't come out with this, because literally talking about sobriety and like actively addicted to this thing. So even if you're in a situation like that, it's better to just come out about it. People will respect you more if you do.
I was going to ask you, what was the response from the community when you came clean and said, hey, turns out I haven't been as sober as I had thought I had been?
So I actually haven't come out
Okay.
publicly on the community.
Right.
This
Fair
is like
enough.
this is like the first time. Yeah, but I feel like
No, that's okay.
the people I have told have been so way more receptive to it than I ever thought they would be. There, I'm so proud of you. You're going to help a lot of people, and people will look up to you even more because you're able to be open and honest about this thing. And just like I said, to talk about the fact that like sobriety is not linear. Just because you relapse does not erase all the progress that you made before. So I feel like that's so important to know.
I agree 100%. There's very rarely a story where it's like someone is like, oh, I had a problem with drugs or alcohol, I got clean, and that was it. I lived the rest of my life clean and sober, and that was it. Usually it's, I got sober, I relapsed, I got sober again, I relapsed, or I got sober from this, like I got addicted to this. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. So I think a lot of people are very much receptive to that. I also think you, like you said, you genuinely didn't know what you were getting into. So it's hard to be unsympathetic to someone that's like, I legitimately was led to believe that I was taking something that was helpful and not harmful. And turns out that wasn't true. It's even harder, I would say, to be unsympathetic in that. I guess before we wrap up here, is there a question that maybe I didn't ask you, or something that you'd like to tell the listeners, or any other topics you'd like to chat about or discuss?
I just want to say thank you for just having this podcast and using this platform to talk about kratom addiction. If you're struggling with it, like look at Reddit, and there's a whole thread. That's basically how I found out that the kava kratom shots were so addictive, is by looking at Reddit and just the stories that people had shared. I'm very fortunate and blessed that it didn't affect me more than it did, because people lost their families. I don't know, but I think it can be fatal. People have been in some really bad situations, and no matter how bad it gets, like there is a way out, I believe. And just to have faith that this is not your forever, and that it is possible to quit, and there's a community out there for you.
There's definitely a community out there. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know where to start, reach out. We're more than happy to help you in any way we can, put you in touch with the resources. Even if you're just questioning your usage and want someone to chat about it, we're happy to do that. And you're welcome. I'm glad Charlie started this. He helped me when I was in early recovery from this substance, and more than happy to pay it forward. All right, I think we can leave it there for tonight. Jasmine, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. I'm sure the listeners will find it valuable. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening. Kratom in the Headlines. Hi, everyone. This is Jacob bringing you this week's Kratom in the Headlines segment. So this week, we have a local news segment from WFTV9 in Orlando, Florida. The title of the segment is Kratom, What is it, and what are the risks? Essentially, it's a 3-minute segment that starts out with the reporter saying that some hail kratom as a miracle for beating opiate addiction. However, it's banned in some other states and countries outside of Florida, and it's causing concern in an Orlando emergency room where patients are continuing to come in with adverse effects. It starts off with the reporter going into a smoke shop, sitting down with the owner or the manager, and talking a bit about the different types of kratom she's got in the store. She highlights some of the ease of use products of shots and capsules that you can just put in your pocket or purse, is what she talks about. And she speaks a bit to the reporter about how the people are coming in for trying to use it for pain or for anxiety or for getting off opiates or depression. And usually the store manager will ask them what they're looking to use it for. What I found the most interesting was the store manager reports that in the last 4 months, her words were, kratom is blowing up and she's selling more and more of it than ever before, which would mirror what we believe we're seeing in the recovery community, with meetings growing and more people reaching out with looking to get off kratom because it's become a problem for them. Then the interviewee reporter moves into speaking with an emergency room doctor who notes that they are seeing more and more patients coming in for adverse effects of kratom,
with ER toxicologists like Dr. Joseph Thundeal raising concerns as well.
Many people that I've seen are using it to try to help wean off of opioid use disorder or opioid addiction. Well, it's a concern because we still don't have good studies to tell us who will benefit from it, what the right dose is, who is going to be at risk for side effects.
One of the known potential side effects is addiction, since kratom mimics effects of an opioid, with the drug being blamed for dozens of deaths across the country and here in Florida.
There is a perception, because it's sold in a tea shop, that it is safe. And like with any drug, we don't quite know what the safe dose is. We don't know what the interactions might be with someone's underlying medical conditions or medications.
And the reporter then gets into noting that one of the largest wrongful death suits in the country was awarded in Florida. I forget exactly where, but it was an $11.1 million settlement that I believe we highlighted in an earlier segment on this podcast and created in the headlines. All that to say, this is just another local news segment that we found, just showing the continued concern of kratom use in the community and more raising awareness about what it is. We're seeing more and more of these, and I suspect as kratom continues to grow in popularity, we will continue to see this. And as more people suffer adverse effects, that will continue to be reported in the news media. So that's kratom in the headlines for this week, and I hope you all keep it kratom free.
Hello, friends. Decima here. Absolutely delighted to be bringing you this week's resource of the week, which is one of the very best medicines ever, laughter. Big fan. I love laughter. Laughter doesn't just make you feel good in the moment, but there are also a lot of surprising health benefits that come from laughter. Laughter has a positive effect on many of our body parts and systems, including the lungs, respiratory system, and the brain. Have you ever found yourself caught in a fit of laughter and come out on the other side on a natural high? That is an absolute dopamine dump, and it all happens because of sexy science. Here are just a few ways, besides the obvious, that laughter is therapeutic and healing. Number one, it improves respiratory function through deep breathing and lung contractions. It even strengthens breathing muscles. Number two, it brings more oxygen to your brain and bloodstream, therefore improving circulation and promoting brain, nerve, and blood health. When you improve brain health, that brings us to number three. That reduces the risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, and stroke. Number four, it helps release toxins from your lungs that in turn can boost your immune system and leave you feeling more energized and refreshed. Number five, laughter causes the brain to release natural painkillers and stress relievers, like those happy little hormones called endorphins that reduce stress and promote overall well being. Number six, it lowers blood pressure and decreases the stress hormone cortisol, which can also decrease your risk for heart attack and promote cardiovascular health. Now, here are a few ways that we can incorporate more laughter into our lives. We're going to want to spend time with friends and family, especially those who are funny or who get our particular brand of humor. Like myself, I inherited my dad's dark sense of humor, and not everybody gets it. Sometimes it falls flat, but I know that I can always count on my dad to induce a good laugh session from our particular genre of humor, and vice versa. Sometimes, if it comes down to it, I just talk to myself and we both have a good laugh. Ba-dum-bum. Anyway, so we're going to play silly games, dance like nobody's watching. We've all heard that one before. I like to make silly TikToks. Show them to the world, show them to nobody. Show them to that one person that you know is going to get it. Laugh and one up you with their TikTok reply. I am quite certain that I'm not nearly as funny to others as I am to myself. But the point is that you have to laugh at yourself. And I'm telling you, when I look back at some of my absolutely ridiculous shit that I have made in the name of pure humor, yes, I howl out loud laughing at my own damn self, okay? Children and pets. Let's drag them into it. We all know how hilarious children and pets are out of the mouths of babes. They are either going to love you for it and enjoy it, or they are going to want you to just leave them the hell alone. Either way, it is going to result in some funny little memories. Yeah, that are going to make you look back and laugh. You dig? Movies, sitcoms, and stand up comedy. Okay, now I don't work for Netflix or anything, but I have to say there is a great example on there of someone laughing at themselves. Baby J. John Mulaney had me rolling and calling the hearse, especially his bits on intervention and his rehab stints. Oh my God. A few of us may find a little bit of that relatable. All I have to say is it was an hour and 20 minutes of gut wrenching, soul healing, tears flowing laughter for me. Watched it a few times, highly recommend, 10 out of 10. What I'm trying to say, you guys, is that we can surround ourselves with positivity and use laughter as a very powerful tool to improve our physical and emotional wellness. In other words, we should laugh like our lives depend on it.